120, 125. Okay, I'm just going to wing this. I'm even writing it out. Let's start recording.
I am now recording.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Windows Central Podcast, episode 120 for January 25th, 2019. Hey everyone, Rubino here, joined with Zach Bowden for another exciting podcast of the Windows Central. The Windows Central. That should be our new name, by the way. I'm obviously going completely unscripted because it's just one of those Fridays. But we have all sorts of cool stuff to talk about this week, including, well, we'll briefly talk about our new logo and branding for the site. So it's about time we updated that. So we'll just kind of give people a little heads up there and answer some brief questions. You had an editorial, Zach, this week talking about are live tiles dead, which I think is an interesting topic. We've talked about it in the past on this podcast, but you're going to go into a little bit more depth as to why you think live tiles may be dead and if that's a bad thing or not. I'm sure some of our core audience will be upset, but that'll be a fun one. Cortana smart home improvement. So last Saturday, we noticed some new features. I actually noticed it a few days before, but there's so much going on and a lot of, Microsoft doesn't really announce this stuff. So it's like, wait, was this new or did I just not notice it? But it turns out it was new. So we'll just go through that and talk about, again, how Cortana is still around. And although so much cynicism around it, it's kind of funny. And we'll talk about finally Microsoft Education announcement. So there was a big education event this week. And I just want to talk a little bit about, what's going on in that space, because education's so important with Microsoft right now. And it's one of the few areas where they're putting a ton of resources into it, a ton of effort into it, and they're getting results. It's actually working for them. And that's important to note. So we'll go to that. Otherwise, Zach, how are you doing on this okay Friday?
I'm pretty good. I was literally just fiddling around with the coloring of your camera on my end to see if I could fix it. I don't know if it's fixed, but it's definitely not as tanned as it was before.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm pretty normal looking in real life. I don't know why this is the Logitech Brio, which we do give our recommendation for as being a very good camera, but it's my coloring is evidently difficult for it to figure out. I'll have to download the software and tweak it a little bit later, but that's that. Anyway, let's go. Let's talk about the new logo quickly on the site. So I don't want to dwell on this too long. It's not an exciting topic, but we have been kicking around the idea of doing a updated brand since our current one was, a couple years old. 2014 was, I think, the last time when we switched from Windows Phone Central to Windows Central in anticipation of the fact that Windows Mobile was probably not going to stick around. See, even in 2014, we knew that the phone angle was going to be a weak one to play. Plus, there was just so much other cool stuff going on with Microsoft that we were leaving on the table that we decided to change. I mean, it gave us an opportunity to talk a little bit more about Surface and laptops. And many of you told me, I don't want to hear about laptops. I don't care about gaming. Just tell us about phones. They were like, shut up. No, we won. So anyway, we did upgrade the site this week, all new design. So go check it out. If it's a cool logo, the W is based off of the 4 windows from the Microsoft logo, which is kind of cool. We just spun it into a W with a little C on there, and it's got all new different colors, and our YouTube channel is being updated. If your fave icon, so when you open up a tab and it says Windows Central and you look at a tab, a little icon, if yours still looks like the old one, you need to clear your cache on your browser and flush it. That's something we can control. We did update our fave icon, but it doesn't update on your end unless you launch a new browser for the first time or you clear your cache. So don't blame us. Just go clear your cache. I know it's annoying, but that's what you'll get your new fave icon. And I know a lot of people are going to ask about the app and all this kind of stuff. No immediate plans for our app. We don't even have a developer anymore for the Windows Central app on Windows 10. He moved on. And so we got to figure that out. We'll probably try to do a PWA thing soon because I think it's probably the best solution. But it is on our back burner of things to take care of. And same with the Android app that we have. We'll get that updated as well, too. But hope you guys like it. We do have some other branding stuff coming specifically for me, but it's not that big of a deal. But
someone in the chat saying, change your name to Microsoft Central. I love it when people say this because I love responding with, look, if you want us to change the name to Windows Central, how about you go and visit Microsoft Central, microsoftcentral.com. Go there. We don't care.
Yeah.
You can go there. You can give them your visits. We don't care. Go to microsoftcentral.com and let us know how they are because, I hear they're a pretty good website.
Yeah, I mean, there's as why we don't call ourselves Microsoft Central, using Microsoft in your name and not being Microsoft.
Yeah, it's risky.
Yeah, it's one of those we could probably slide by and it'd probably be okay, but one day we could wake up and a cranky lawyer sends us a cease and desist, and that could cause problems for us. It would be a little bit awkward if we are all out there as Microsoft Central and all of a sudden we have to change our name.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, let's just avoid it, right? So
Yeah.
we're happy with Windows Central, and Windows is still central to Microsoft's a lot of their ambitions and projects. But speaking of, let's talk about live tiles, a core feature some would say of Windows, or at least it used to be. So you wrote an editorial this week, Zach, talking about how you think live tiles are dead. We've talked about this on the podcast in the past, and I think there's some good reason to consider this, especially with the demise of Windows 10 Mobile. Where I still think that model for live tiles made a ton of sense. It was the big selling point. It was also, I would say, a weakness to people who were familiar with the icon grid system, which has come to represent all smartphones. And while this gave Microsoft its own design language, its own unique, take on it, one that I would argue, and I think many of you would agree with, was a more efficient system. It also caused a lot of people to freak out over it and not like, that's too weird looking and, oh, it looks all messy. And so it caused problems. I think that was one of the issues with Windows Phone, even though it was also one of its strengths. But when it comes to PC, which is where we're at now, and something like HoloLens, I should point out, where I'm not sure live tiles make a ton of sense. I don't know. But tell me why you went with this.
So yeah, the editorial basically goes along the lines of, are live tiles dead? It's not me putting a statement out there. I'm not stating they are dead. I'm not that arrogant. I'm asking, are they dead? Because I've been talking to a lot of people internally at Microsoft recently about Windows Lite and future ambitions and future projects that Microsoft want to do, and a lot of Microsoft's design right now and a lot of the things they're doing don't really. The live tile like design and the idea that used to it used to be the forefront of Windows Phone. Remember, when you think Windows Phone, you think live tiles. When you think Windows 8, you think live tiles. They were pushing the live tile sort of brand quite a bit a few years ago. But with Windows 10, they've really dialed that back to the point in which the live tiles on the start menu aren't used by many people anymore. In fact, I think it's because it's in the start menu that live tiles aren't used. Live tiles were great because they were glanceable. They were a glanceable feature. They would update live. You wouldn't have to click into an app to see what was going on. It would just give you the latest tweets or the latest messages or the latest photos, whatever. But with Windows 10, they put all of that into a start menu, which isn't the default UI. It's hidden in a menu that you have to manually click on, which takes away that glanceability aspect. No longer is it always on display for you to just look at. It's now gone. You have to manually click into the start menu to see what's there. And even then, the live tiles aren't already updating. It takes a second to refresh and update with the latest stuff. And on desktop, most people aren't going into the start menu anyway. Most people pin everything they want to use onto the taskbar. Maybe when they set up their PC for the first time, they go into the start menu to get those apps to be pinned to the taskbar. But once they're all there, after like a few weeks of having their PC up and running, the start menu is rarely opened. And me and Dan have seen the internal documentation that suggests that usage of the start menu isn't very high to begin with, let alone the people who customize the start menu. Most people don't customize the live tile aspect of the start menu. They just install their apps, they see it in that recents menu on the apps list, and they pin it to taskbar, and that's it. They don't really mess about with resizing tiles in the start menu, making some big, some small, turning some live tiles on, some live tiles off. Very few people do that. Sure, you and me do it, Dan, and people who are listening to this podcast likely do it and think it's amazing, but the majority of users pretty much don't. And I think that's the biggest reason as to why I think these are dead. In addition, Windows Lite, we talked a bit about this last week, supposedly doesn't have live tiles. I've been talking to a few people about this. Live tiles aren't a thing. It has like an app launcher similar to Chrome OS's, sort of like squares with little...
They're tiles. They're just not live.
Yeah, with like slight rounded corners. They kind of look like the iOS app icons. They're slightly rounded corners and stuff. They're just not live. They're spaced out quite a bit. And this got me thinking, like, okay, so if Windows Lite doesn't have it, what else doesn't have it that's Windows? HoloLens doesn't have live tiles. It has the tile user interface, but those tiles in the HoloLens start menu aren't live. They don't update with information. They're just tiles, just what they look like. In addition, Windows Mixed Reality headsets don't have live tiles. And else, Surface Hub doesn't have live tiles. Surface Hub 2 doesn't have live tiles. So
Xbox doesn't have live tiles.
Xbox doesn't have live tiles. Basically, everything apart from Windows 10 Desktop doesn't have live tiles now. And you think if Microsoft really were pushing this live tile idea, they'd be adding live tiles to every platform where they can put them. HoloLens has live tiles, Xbox has live tiles. That'd be amazing. And to be fair, live tiles on Xbox would kind of be cool because it'd be like, oh, the latest achievements rolling through, or like, oh, your friend is currently playing this game in like one of the tiles. That'd be pretty nice. It's not there. Why isn't it there? It's because people don't like live tiles. People don't use them. Us Windows Phone fans love them, but I think a lot of people, normal people at least, like Dan said, find them too messy. Or memorize, for example, a lot of people, you may already know someone in real life who's like this, but they have a PIN code on their phone, obviously, but they don't know their PIN code. They know where the buttons are to press to unlock their phone. They're like, I don't actually know the digits. I just know which ones to press. That's the kind of people that live tiles wouldn't be good for, because live tiles change. The icon isn't always present. It's a bit of information or someone's face or whatever. So the icon for that specific app may not always be there. So for somebody who just memorizes icon locations, when they go into their phone and that tile's changed now, or on the start menu, they're like, oh, where's my where's Slack? I can't see Slack. And I have done this multiple times. Like, where's Slack? Oh, there it is, because someone's face is in it instead of the actual Slack icon. I personally love live tiles. I love them so much. I think they're great. But they are, I don't think, for a society who is much more accustomed to just static icons now and having like little badges on top of them, like on Android and iOS, I think it would be a mistake for Microsoft to try and continue to push this live tile aspect, even though a lot of people just don't bother with it already. I think it doesn't make sense. And especially with Windows Lite not having them now, it gives even less of an incentive for users and developers to support live tiles on Windows 10 Desktop, I think, because why would they do it? Some app developers can't even support them now. Twitter and its PWA doesn't have a live tile. Spotify has one, but it just I think it's a set amount of text that just rolls through every now and then. Slack has one, but I feel like Slack's one's kind of broken in the sense that it shows like a face and then the text. It should do both. I don't know why. It is a bit weird. They all do it a bit differently. Some of them don't do it at all, and some of them do it terribly. Some of them do it well. I think MyTube does it quite well. MyTube, and I think GroupMe does it well. But yeah, like it's all over the place with live tiles, and I don't think that they're going to be around for much longer. I don't think Microsoft will remove them from Windows 10 Desktop. I just don't think Microsoft is going to continue putting any effort into them. Not that they have been anyway. I mean, the last time live tiles were updated with a new feature, and even then it wasn't really a feature but more a developer thing, was when they added, I can't remember the name of it, but that thing where developers could have it so whatever's showing up in the live tile is the thing that they go to when they click on the live tile. I cannot remember the name of that API or whatever it was they introduced, but I don't know of a single app that has taken advantage of that API. Like even the Microsoft News app doesn't do it, and that would be one of the perfect examples to do that.
Remember when they would sync together too with your PC and your phone? It'd all be was like it was all up in the cloud. Yeah, that was. I mean, like I said, this stuff made more sense with phones when we had those around, and that was really what was driving that whole UI. In fact, that's what drove Windows 8, right? The creation of that UI was based off of Windows Phone 7, and that whole model. And I thought it was interesting at the time. I mean, you could argue live tiles as a tablet UI was definitely more interesting than what we have right now, which is this weird hybrid desktop thing that has better touch controls. This stuff is difficult because, sorry, as I mentioned, like, live tiles I think were really interesting and efficient, especially on phones, but they also cause people, concern. And I remember, I mean, how many people used to see a Windows phone and be like, it's too messy and it looks chaotic. And that kind of always was the initial reaction to it. The difference was when you got one and you got to set it up yourself and personalized it, it was just like, oh, this is awesome. And it was how to cross that boundary for people. But a lot of people never got that far. They just saw it and said, oh, I don't like the way that looks. It's weird. And so they never went there. And I just don't think it makes much sense on a PC. I go into my start menu on occasion, but I don't pop up my start menu and just stare at it for a few seconds. I mean, I do, but you don't stare at it as much as
you're
a
not
smartphone.
staring at the start menu. You're looking for the thing you want to open. It's not like, oh, let me just look at the start menu. You're like, oh, let me find that app that I'm looking for. That's why you open the start menu, right?
Yeah. And someone brought this up in comments, and I think it's kind of interesting. It's like you have apps like Rainmeter, I think it's called, for Windows PC. I've used this before where you can go download it and it's people skin it. It's one of these things I don't like to get into because you can just go down the rabbit hole and you just spend hours customizing everything. But the main thrust of this program is it puts like meters and stuff on your desktop. And so your desktop, you do look at it all the time. And now your desktop is like a live desktop, right? And Microsoft has experimented. I think it used to be called live desktop. It goes back a long time ago. But this idea of like having like information in meters and stuff like that embedded in the desktop background, um, to me, that makes more sense, right? Because you do, the question is, how do you do that without making your desktop background, gross looking or too complicated? But I think there should have been some, and maybe they have explored this internally with UIs and different ways of showing information. But you can kind of tell once Action Center came into play and Notification Center, which again came from phones. I think that model for delivering information is more familiar to people who just have Android and iOS smartphones. You used to having this thing that slides out and here's all your information. I still think that model can be improved. I can't really tell you how because I'm terrible at design, but I just know like I think that's a better interaction model. And that's kind of why live tiles have gone away. It's like when you have an action center, that kind of substitutes.
Yeah. A few people in the comments of the editorial I wrote were saying things like, the reason they haven't updated live tiles with new features is because there's nothing they can add to it. It's pretty much, that's it's set in stone, which isn't true. We've seen research projects in Microsoft that propose new features like interactive live tiles, which would have been an awesome idea to make them more, you can do things on the live tile without actually having to go into the app. That would have been a cool addition. Also, me and Dan have seen a bunch of internal stuff about ideas and stuff they had for the start menu and live tiles that they've just never introduced. And these aren't recent ideas. These are ideas that date back to 2014, 2015, whilst they were, preparing to build Windows 10. And none of them ever showed up because they never put them into full time development, or the people who were trying to propose these ideas were shot down by other people trying to propose other ideas for different features. I don't know how it works at Microsoft, but none of the live tile stuff really has sort of popped up or shown up. Sure, they added a large live tile size at some point and the ability to unpin an entire group to start, but I'd argue the ability to unpin groups and name folders isn't live tile specific but more start menu specific, because you can replace the live tiles and just have like normal icons in there, and you can still do the unpin group thing and name group folders in start menu. So yeah, I don't think, like I said, I don't think Microsoft is going to outright pull the live tiles from Windows 10 desktop anytime soon, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see future efforts for Windows, like Windows Lite, for example, just not have them. Because me and Dan have seen Windows Lite, it doesn't have live tiles, at least currently. Maybe they'll add them in the future, but from what me and Dan have seen, it looks like what they're going for is kind of set in stone with this sort of static icon design, which Chrome OS, iOS have sort of pioneered, and Android, obviously. And honestly, I don't think it's that much of a big deal because normal people understand how static icons work, or just normal icons work, and Windows Lite is very much aimed at that kind of audience. It's not for power users. It's for people who just want to go on the web, watch YouTube, listen to Spotify, and maybe write a Word document or a PowerPoint presentation every now and then. That's pretty much what Windows Lite's for.
Yeah, and this question about, design, UI, desktop, interaction models, start, all that is super complicated. There aren't like a ton. When it comes even to desktop, things have changed significantly. The fact that I have like touch displays on desktop now is even kind of weird. But even there, it goes to show you like, okay, so I'm using Surface Studio 2 right now. It's touch display. How many times have I reached out to touch the display today? Like pretty much zero. I've used the pen on occasion today, but that's like a different, that's a nice option to have. But versus a tablet where you're going to be always touching the screen, right? When the screen's closer to you and smaller to you, a Surface Go, for instance, the interaction model changes. And this is sort of the problem that Microsoft's been trying to face over the last few years, is how to come up with a UI that spans across all these different experiences, but it's also good on each one, right? And this was Apple's criticism that like, oh, you can't take a toaster and a refrigerator, right? Merge them together, right? It's two different things. I think they're I don't want to be too critical of them too, because I think they have navigated this pretty well so far. I mean, if you look at something like the Surface Pro and how it works, and I know a lot of our audience criticizes it as a tablet. They're not very good tablets. I think they're kind of actually okay as tablets, but I'm also not a huge fan of tablets. Like, I've talked about I have a couple of iPads. I've had Android tablets. Like, I don't get any real enjoyment out of them.
Is that because you have used an iPad? Actually, never mind. I forgot that. 'Cause I was going to say maybe that's
Yeah.
because the Windows tablet experience isn't amazing compared to say the iOS tablet experience.
So I mean, I think the iOS tablet experience is good visually. Like I give them all the credit
It's a
in the
dumbed
world.
down experience, but that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, it looks beautiful, and it does the way it visually works. It makes you want to touch things and go like a little
Yeah.
child and just tap the screen, right? My problem is all that doesn't make up for the fact that I find most of what I do on an iPad useless. So, I mean, an iPad to me is more of a consumptive device still.
Mhm.
Whenever I want to start to like do work or use a keyboard, I had to like put it down and grab a laptop. So, though, and I've mentioned this before about those are solvable problems too for Apple. If they want to solve those, they haven't had the urge to. But um, this is, but when you look at the Surface and where Microsoft has gone with Touch, I actually feel like they've done more good than harm. They haven't completely blown this. There's definitely room for improvement, but I just think it's a really hard problem when it comes to desktop. You know, if you look at something like the launcher on OS 10, uh, the little bar that sits at the bottom and stuff like that, I actually don't think that's a terrible model, right? Better start menus are interesting, but you end up going down this like you have to launch it and go down menus. If you remember like the Windows 7 and XP models where it would just be sub menus and stuff like that, the stuff is hard as these devices get more complicated and there's more options and programs installed. How do you balance, all that being complicated with simplified? And what you're talking about with the Windows Light OS, that they're working on with the Windows Core and stuff like that. That is a more simplified light computing, right? And you and I are in agreement on this that that's the future of computing for most people, not everyone, and definitely probably people listening to this podcast who are the pro users who want, all the features. But that's going to continue to exist. That will be there for you as an option. But I'm talking for regular people who are interested in information technology. This idea of, if you look at what computers are used for today, it's primarily transfer of information, whether you're sharing photos or media or writing or on the web or social. That's its primary purpose. So how do you create something for that?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's an interesting topic. For me, like I said, lifestyles made more sense when phones were around. Now that phones aren't around, it's hard for me to defend them or be excited about them.
Exactly. And going back to the whole iOS Windows Lite thing, I think Microsoft has taken a lot of inspiration from the simplicity of iOS and iPad, because Windows Lite is, as Dan mentioned, it is a very simplified version of Windows. I think to a lot of people, a lot of normal, air quotes, normal people, Windows 10 or just Windows as we know it is a rather complicated OS compared to the iPad and the operating systems that run on Chrome OS
Sure.
on our phones. It's a big beast. Windows. It's very complicated. There's Windows, there's window controls, there's context menus, there's everything. And iPad doesn't have most of that. iPad is like you can have one app running, maybe two or three if you bought the most expensive version, but you can do one thing at a time more or less because that's all you can handle. And the people are like,
Right.
yep. I'll just have Twitter and maybe I'll have Docket with, I don't know, Word or something. Because you can do that. You can do split screen apps on iPad now.
And this always comes down to that problem of if how do you build an operating system? Like, who are you building it for? Who is your target audience? I would say Apple always had this sort of more narrow, we're going to build this thing. It's going to be made for the masses, so it's easy for them to use. And we're not catering to the pro niche users, the XDA developer type people. And I think Microsoft can, and I think they're trying to balance this off. And I think one way of doing it always was this idea of an adaptive operating system and UI, where if you want, a pro UI, you should be able to enable that, and you'll get all the, right click commands. Right now, it's on my Windows. I right click. It's this menu that's 20 items. And all I want to do is maybe set an image as a wallpaper. It's just like I have to sit there and read for a minute. It's like that. Oh, set to desktop, But you look at all those commands, most of that stuff for me, I'm like, why is this here? And then for some people, they're like, it has to be there, And so it's like, how do you balance all of that? Because everybody has different needs. I think having different UIs, I think that's kind of what Microsoft's trying to do with this Windows Core OS and this idea of adaptive UIs and systems for different types of computing experiences.
And that's also why Windows 10, as we know it, isn't going away. It's never going to go away. There are too many people that depend on it. There's too many people that depend on its ancient history of backwards compatibility and whatnot. Being able to just dive into System 32 and find some really old control panel applet just to control some certain element of your PC. There are people who need that, and Windows 10 Pro will always be there for those people. But for the majority of everybody else who just wants to turn on a computer, have it last all day, it's instant updates, etc., etc. Just check email, watch a video, all that stuff. Then Windows Lite or this Core OS stuff is probably the option for them. And I honestly, from what I've seen with Windows Lite, I'm excited. I'm excited for it. I want it now, and I hope Microsoft does announce it at Build. I would love to be at Build and have them announce it because that'd be cool.
It would be cool. I think it's going to be real interesting about, we've also mentioned this before about what they're going to call it.
Skylight.
Yeah, Skylight, right? Yeah, that's the name they should call it. But yeah, I mean, do they call it Windows,
I don't
Windows
think
10?
they should. I really don't think they should.
Yeah, it is this. I've said this before, and I keep referring to the past, but I feel like I need to drill this. That Microsoft's they're tied to the past and its legacy users, who are also part of its core base, but they also need to go forward. And this idea of like, how do you announce this? Like so far, like when we talk about Surface Hub 2, and we ask Microsoft, they're like, it's a new Windows experience. Like they use these like really generic sort of non-defining things. And I kind of get that, right? And that's how I think they're going to talk about it. It's like it's a different Windows experience versus Windows 10. I'm sure there's a lot of discussions about this stuff.
I think this would be a good time to give it something new, not Windows based, something entirely different. Because I have a feeling that Windows Lite will be pushed heavily on the education market, and
Yeah.
the majority of that, young people who aren't really accustomed to the Windows brand anyway. Microsoft can have an entirely new generation grow up knowing this entirely new OS, which has a completely different name, and not have to worry about the reputation of Windows and what Windows carries with it.
It really does give them an opportunity for rebranding and just really getting a different message out there. Mm-hmm. I mean, it would be kind of cool to see a commercial like new Skylight OS, It really should call it Skylight OS. But call it something like that and really push its new features. I mean, it's no different than how I see Google stupid commercials for its Chromebooks. Their thing is like, oh, you hate viruses, you want all-day battery life? Like, try the new Chrome OS. It's super easy to use.
I'm picturing Microsoft running a marketing campaign where it pits its new OS with its old
Yeah,
OS. Like, our new OS is way better than our old thing.
Hate all this weird stuff from 20 years ago. Well, no worries. But it does give them an opportunity to do a different message and articulate a different. And this is 100% tied to new hardware that it would launch with, right? We're not talking about your current desktop gaming rig running this. It's not. They're not going to try to sell you this. This is going to be like tied to brand new hardware that's going to be like a super thin laptop, run probably Windows 10 and ARM, hopefully. A Snapdragon 8CX, right? And then you see it, it's like super thin. It opens up. It's just all display, right? No bezels. They're going to be like, 14 hours of battery life, LTE connected, instant on, runs all your familiar Microsoft apps, so Office, Skype, whatever you need to, whatever else stuff you use for Microsoft, GroupMe, Teams, all these kind of things will be shown off, and you sell that, right? That's a unique experience because you're going to look at that device and you're going to be like, oh, that's interesting, and what's that about? I think that gives an opportunity for people. I don't know.
I think it's interesting as well because Microsoft can, since it's a very web orientated experience, Microsoft can be like, it has free Office because Office Web is free, or you can be like, if you want to use Google Docs, it has Google Docs because the web, it has YouTube. Microsoft
and then
can
show the screen rotate back and turn it into a tablet, and you can ink on it with OneNote. It's just like,
since it's the web, Microsoft can technically say, oh, it has YouTube. Of course, it has YouTube, and Google can be like, no, it doesn't. Because it's the web. Yes, it does. I think a lot of app problems get solved with doing this as well, I think. So I'm very interested in Windows Lite. I'm very interested in how Microsoft's going to market it, call it, and push it to developers as well. Because I think I think the developer talk, if they do an asset build, I think the developer sort of push for this is going to be very interesting as well.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the discussion we had last week with CES 2019 about how, and talk about Mobile World Congress too, this idea that computing, it's not computers and like the traditional laptop or a full desktop, but that stuff's still around, still being innovated on. Saw a lot of it just a couple weeks ago. I'm talking about just mobile computing is this thing now that is changing categories and bleeding in between things. And we're starting to see dual display devices, all this. And this whole idea of like mobile computing going forward, I think is a really interesting one. I do have I think it'll come out. It's one of those, sometimes I record videos and like, I don't write a lot of scripts for my videos because of timing. And I did one yesterday. I don't know. We'll see if it goes live on the channel. I have to watch it first. But the idea is that, and we'll talk about this maybe next week more, that 2020 is going to be a big year for Microsoft. And I don't mean big year as in terms of sales. I mean big year as in make or break.
Andromeda.
Yeah. Well, because in the thesis is in 2020, specifically in January, exactly a year from now, Windows 7 support, long-term support comes to an end, which doesn't affect many of our audience here, but for enterprise people, it's actually a big deal. And the reason it's a big deal is because the laptop market and PC market has kind of stabilized actually over the last few years. Now it's flat, basically with some small little growths here and there, but it's not exploding, but it's not sinking anymore. And that was the story like in 2012, like the PCs were starting to sink as smartphones were rising, tablets were rising. There were articles, you can go look them up, saying how the PC the PC's over, era of the PC's done. It's everything else. And here we are now in 2019, and I'm talking about some of the coolest laptops and PCs I've ever seen, and the industry is stabilized, specifically around HP, Lenovo, and Dell. Are the three top manufacturers have seen a lot of growth, usually at the expense of smaller companies like Acer and Asus. But 2020. This could come to an end. Right now, a lot of those sales and a lot of the growth we're seeing or stabilization is tied to companies buying new hardware to get onto Windows 10 for long-term support. What happens after 2020 when all those companies are on board now with Windows 10? You and I will be writing a story in a couple months about how there's more Windows 10 users now because of that bump. I'm sure in the next quarter or two, if Intel can get their last quarter, sales were down slightly, partially because of Intel wasn't able to meet demand. But assuming Intel can meet demand, we may even see some more positive growth. But I think that could end. So the question is, how does Microsoft push forward? And that's why you're seeing, for one, Zach and I talking in the last 16 months about Windows Core OS and light computing and devices like Andromeda and Centaurus and dual display devices from Lenovo and Intel and this idea of 4G always connected PCs with Windows 10 and ARM. You're also hearing a lot about cloud gaming and streaming. Like the reason you're hearing about all this stuff, I think it's pretty obvious, is that after 2020, like Microsoft needs to be there for whatever the next mobile computing shift is going to be. And they're trying to find it themselves, not just be there, but steer that story. So all the stuff we're talking about today, it's got to start, being live in 2020, in my opinion. And that's why I think we're hopefully going to start seeing it this year.
I mean, Microsoft has been working on Core OS for a long time now. Like, I remember when we first started hearing about this, I was like, what the hell is this? Is this like a thing or what is this? And yeah, it has grown and it survived the the leaving of Terry Myerson, and it is on its way. So I think, this is definitely the future for Microsoft. And I'm pretty excited about it. Also, someone's saying, if Microsoft releases another OS, wouldn't that eat into the Windows 10 market share? And I'm like, well, Windows Lite, even if it isn't called Windows, it's still Windows. It still runs UWP apps and stuff. I think it would count towards the Windows 10 market share number.
I don't think that really matters. Like
right.
if it's versus like what, right? So like, say if it takes away from Windows 10 market share, what was the alternative that consumer would have done there? Bought an Android device or an iOS device. So because clearly that customer is looking for something that fits that mold. So I think Microsoft would be like, we'd rather keep them in our ecosystem,
right,
and as a licensee than them go to iOS and Android.
I agree entirely. Also, slightly off topic, or almost entirely off topic, Jason's in the chat, and that reminded me to mention that there is a bug bash going on. If you are
Yes.
in the Insider program and you're running 19H1 builds, Microsoft are doing a bug bash, which means if you have a bug that you're hitting and you want Microsoft to fix it, submit feedback right now. And also, they've got quests in the feedback hub because they want you to test a bunch of stuff specifically to get feedback on that as well. 19H1, there was a new build this week. I'll briefly mention it. There was a new build, not much in it worth talking about. We're at this point now where 19H1 is more or less done. It's now cleaning up and making sure the update is good enough for release in a few months. So somebody saw, and this happens always a few months before the update is ready to sign off, someone saw some list where it's called April 2019 update, which isn't really news. So yeah, we are getting to that point now where
It's probably going to be called the April 2019 update, which is fine.
Yeah.
You and I are not doing a podcast about the name.
Not again. Not again.
We're not doing that again. If they call it the April 2019 update, totally fine with that.
It's not news anymore. So someone else was like, oh yeah, it's version 1903 because they updated the version number finally. I'm like, yeah, but we kind of knew that back in 2017 when they announced 2 updates a year because, it's always 1703, 1803, 1903, 2003. So yeah, it's... at this point, I think the builds are good enough to run on your main machines. I'm going to actually upgrade my Surface Studio tonight, hopefully. There is still a list of known issues, so check that first. There may be a specific issue that you don't want to hit. I've checked it and it's all good for me, so I'm going to upgrade tonight. So a couple of more months left of development. It should be signed off in March and released in April, assuming there are no showstopper bugs or delays as there has been in the past.
Speaking of, if Jason is listening, I haven't been able to update my Yoga C930 to the latest fast ring build. I tried last night, kept failing. I was like, come on.
Is it running Windows 10S?
No, the C930. It's the Yoga, it's a full 14-inch PC.
Let's do some live troubleshooting on the Windows Central podcast.
I restarted the PC, did it again, downloaded it, went to install, said it was missing files. I don't know.
Oh dear. Anyway.
Send me my feedback links logs, Daniel. Oh, well, I mean, yes. Okay. I should have.
What was you expecting? Like,
I know. Have you submitted
he'd come to your house and fix it for you?
I just undid it. I was on my couch, sprawled out. It's like, yeah, I'll try again later. I'll try again next week.
Should we talk about Cortana?
Yeah. So, okay. So we love talking about Cortana because you and I are like, I mean, it's not dead. It's like I'm going to keep saying this. You and I have talked about and written more about new Cortana stuff or tie-ins or features or extensions of it in the last 6 months, in the last 2 years. And yet we keep hearing people say, oh, it's dead. It's over. Who cares? And I get the sentiment. I don't want to I understand why that's out there. But it's also funny to me because this whole cycle of negative thinking is what drives people companies like Microsoft to eventually cancel something. I mean, it didn't help ever that in Windows Phone in 2012 and 2013, the heyday stuff, right? When Nokia was actually kind of releasing really innovative hardware that all of us were able to go, oh, that's cool, iPhone. Look at what we can do, right? There was we had Qi wireless charging. We had the first optical image stabilization stuff. It was low light performance. And I had to argue with people going who cares about shooting at nighttime? Back in that time, the media and all the tech press were still yeah, but does it really have a chance? And everybody, oh, who uses Windows phones? And, and it was just there was always, if you were a Windows Phone user, there was no good time where the press and there was the zeitgeist was on your side. From day one, it was, that's cool, it's fun, but really, is anyone going to use this thing when Android and iOS is out there? And that self-fulfilling prophecy became real. By 2014, 2015, you did really start to wane, and it became more and more realistic. I would also say Nokia's devices at the time were not helping. But I see this with Cortana where it's we're seeing a bunch of stuff happening, but then the general feeling, it's two things. One, it's we're getting all these new features and stuff, but people are like, yeah, it doesn't matter. They're just like, it's dead. They're not doing anything with it. It's like, yeah, but they just announced six things. It's like, no, it doesn't matter. Two, I'm not hearing what necessarily would make this AI assistant thing not be like that. Outside of, I do hear a lot of it's not available in my country, which again, legitimate point. I'm not going to defend that. But at least here in the US, where thing is just everything is peachy. We're
Everything
winning
just
like
works in
crazy.
America.
Yeah. Uh, so anyway, long that was a long intro. Long story short, so what happened was in Cortana under the home. Oh, mine just turned on. Under the home settings, um, there's this new feature for rules and scenes and stuff like that. So the idea here is like you can link up multiple things. So I can like, say, movie time, hey, we're trying to turn on movie time and my lights will go down to a certain setting and my temperature will turn up and I'll disable something. Like you can link these things up. It's essentially an IFTTT, if this then that setup that a lot of people, prefer. Now it's not as I still don't like how you can't configure stuff or type it in, but it's there, right? And it's being set up and then rules or contingent things like I can actually be my car and tell, you know, Microsoft's Assistant set the temperature to 68 degrees in 15 minutes so that when I get home it's on, right? So you can actually do those kind of rules now. And it's actually kind of nice, right? A lot of people as nice as this stuff is, though, a lot of people have been asking for it. And I've heard a lot of people, oh my God, it's so cool. I love this stuff. I still hate everything about these things. And this is like, this goes for Alexa and Google too. I do not see this. I find this like, is like, if this, then that is neat. But it's still like, I don't see consumers doing this. I don't see consumers drawing up rules. I see a bunch of dudes who have wives that put up with their stuff, who are like, I'm going to set up my smart home and everything's linked up. And they think it's the coolest thing in the world. They flick, they give one audio command and everything turns on and rotates, whatever. Meanwhile, everyone else in their family just rolls their eyes. And it's like, I don't know. I find this stuff like both interesting, but like, I don't use a lot of this stuff. I have a brand new home. I'm still setting up smart home stuff, and it's a pain. It's annoying. I have Hughes lights everywhere. I have smart thermostats, obviously, but it's still like, okay. But I'm glad it's here. It works on Android. It works on iOS, which again, those have brand new apps that just came out, 3.0. It works on the PC stuff too. So I think it's definitely a good step. It's things that people have been asking for. I don't know, as someone in the US, right? Let's just forget about the whole it's not available in my market thing. I'm not going to defend that. But here in the US, like I have Alexa. I have like 3 Alexa devices. I have like 3 Cortana devices. I don't have Google Home. Just not interested. But I'm curious, as someone who has those and uses them, I don't know what Cortana is really missing. And that's not necessarily me saying I'm right and you're wrong in this. I honestly, I think there are differences. I know some people have said like, oh, Cortana doesn't have this timer feature or something like that. But as like a regular kind of passive user, neither one of these systems have anything amazing about them or killer about them. I find them all like smartphones were in 2005. A lot of potential here, some cool ideas, definitely not ready for mainstream users. Like this is not something I'm going to go tell my friends who are raising kids who don't read blogs every day about what's new. These people aren't going to be really hooked on this stuff. So I'm just kind of confused as to what is so missing, like why Cortana is so far behind in this area compared to something like Alexa. Um,
I think the answer most people give you is in mindshare and when it comes to hardware, right? It's like there aren't
yeah,
Cortana speakers. That's the big problem I think Cortana faces. It's not that there's less features, although some people like to give that argument, which is entirely false. It's more or less on par with a Google Assistant and Alexa. Maybe a bit behind Alexa. I haven't really done the research. Alexa definitely has more skills, but I'm not entirely sure if that's a positive thing. A lot of the skills on Alexa are kind of useless. I also think that Microsoft, and we've said this before, Microsoft missed a big opportunity of not positioning the Xbox as like a hub for your home, right? They should have done that, and they kind of were thinking about it back in 2013 with the Xbox One. It had the Kinect, it had voice commands, etc. Then they introduced Cortana to Xbox One whenever they did that, 2015, I guess. And they sort of never did nothing more with it. Like you can't control. I don't think you can control any of the smart home stuff from the Cortana on Xbox, which I think is a huge mistake. I think they should absolutely allow you to do that, especially with the rumors of them introducing a new Xbox accessory at some point, which will let you bring back these sort of voice commands to Xbox without having to have a headset plugged in and a webcam as well, apparently. If they are doing that, then I think now's the time to push that idea, because there are definitely more Xbox Ones in the world than there are Harman Kardon invokes, I think. So, that's 200 or however many million Cortana devices already that people have in their homes. Then you'd start a marketing campaign, say, hey, your Xbox One, it's now a smart assistant. You can talk to it and you can say things and it will do things for you. That's an instant, now, there's an extra 100 million or however many million Xboxes there are, Xbox Ones there are. With Cortana, that's another however many million Cortana devices. And that's how you kickstart Cortana in, a competitive way. Although Satya did already come out and say that he doesn't want to have Cortana compete with the likes of Alexa and Google Assistant. But just because it's on Xbox doesn't mean it has to compete with them. It's still going to be a skill on Alexa and Google Assistant devices, which works with Alexa, I guess, and you can still use Alexa on the Cortana devices, etc., etc. But I do think, Microsoft did have a chance here to sort of push out Cortana to more people.
Yeah, I think no one really saw, and I'm still going to go to Matt with this. No one really saw the whole, like, let's just sell a speaker that you talk to and it plays music thing is like a huge industry, right? And I still will make the point that Amazon's whole purpose of this was to get you to use it to buy stuff from Amazon. And the latest numbers we had, only 2% of users are actually using it for that, which tells me it's actually Alexa's a huge failure. From Amazon's perspective, it worked it up in other ways. It gets some brand recognition and all this kind of stuff, but it's still technically a failure from what their original goal was. My contention here, and this is me from my experience, is forget about Cortana, right? So as I said, I have like 3 Alexa devices. I have the Echo, I have the Echo Show, and the Echo Spot. So pretty modern. I don't have the sequels, but I like them. They're cool. None of them I consider amazing. I don't get it. Like, I have them. They're connected up to my Ring, so I can, tell my Echo Show, I'm like, show me the front door, and boop, it shows up. All right, cool. I've actually never really used it. I just show it to friends, like, look what I can do. I don't actually use it because I got to turn around and look at my front door. I guess what I'm saying is I'm in the United States. I have the ideal stuff. I have these devices. I have smart home stuff. I got them linked up. Now I know someone in our comments, some guy who's in his 20s who spent, $3,000 in 2 weekends or, setting up his house. So it's like something out of the future. Yeah, my house isn't that. But I'm saying I have all of this. I don't get it. I don't get why so many of you are like, Cortana sucks. It's like, okay, I have the ideal according to you. I think it kind of sucks. I don't think it's that sucks. Great. Yeah, like I'm not looking at this like I'm living in the future. I'm like, and I can tell you one thing, my girlfriend gives no dams about it whatsoever. Never uses it. Doesn't talk to anything. Never just. And this is true for a lot of my friends. They just don't get it or think it's that cool. So this is why I'm so sort of contentious on this issue, because of people who are like whining about not having Cortana in their country. I kind of get it, but I'm telling you, as someone who's living in that like 1% dream smart connected home with smart devices, I don't get it. I don't see what you're missing here. How many random facts are you asking random robotic voices in your house to fulfill you every day? I don't get what they're used for. I just don't.
A lot of people actually feel stupid when they have to talk to these speaker things. Like I have friends, so I'm like, there's music playing out of the Harman Kardon. I'm like, you can just shout, pause it. And they're like, can you do it? I don't want to say, talk to the speaker. I'm like, okay, fine. Because they feel stupid. And honest, I get it. I totally get that. It is kind of weird to a lot of people to talk to a non-living thing as if it's a person. It is weird. And I think it's going to be a long while. I think part of the reason is because the interaction with these speakers still isn't natural. It's very much
Sure.
a command based thing. You say the wait command, then you say the command itself, and then you wait for a response. And it's not really like a conversational experience. You can't
Oh
have
yeah, like
a back and forth conversation with the speaker yet.
even if you say something it doesn't understand, it's not like, oh, I didn't really understand that. Did you mean? It's not like a human where it's like it tells you it didn't really understand and then helps you to
Yeah.
get you where you are. So, and I don't want to like completely hate it. I just think this stuff is early. I think
Hmm.
it's super early, and that no one's impressed Dan Rubino so far. That's all I'm saying. Like, I mean, I have an Android phone. It's got the Google Assistant on there. It's like, okay, I still find myself 9 times out of 10, when I need information or to do something, I'll grab my phone to do it, which is how I think most people are going to do this. Like I have Hughes lights everywhere in my house. I love them. Do you know how many times I've asked like Alexa or Cortana to turn my lights on and off? I just grab my phone and I pick the scene and all this. I don't know what my scene is called, that one I wanted that's kind of purplish. I don't know. It's like this stuff is weird to me. And so I get people are complaining about Cortana. I also don't get what you think you're missing.
Yeah.
That's been
But
so
what we're
amazing.
saying here is Cortana isn't dead. They're all dead.
Yeah.
They're
Well,
all dead.
it's early, and I think it's just weird to be like, this one is so much better. Like I don't see it, and that could be on me. I mean, I would love to have someone come over and be like, all right, Dan, we're going to sit you down, and this is exactly where they fail. And I guarantee you, I'd still be at the end of that and be like, shrug, like, I
Mm.
don't care. The most I use Alexa for is the same I use for Cortana for is I'm like, literally, I come home from the package store. That's a liquor store for you who aren't from New England. And I have beer that wasn't in the fridge, and I put it in the freezer. And I'm like, hey, Alexa, remind me to take the beer out of the freezer in 45 minutes. That is literally what I use it most of the time for. Um, it's not useful. I just don't get it. I think people with kids find it more interesting because they just don't talk to me. Go talk to that
That might be
speaker.
another thing. Like again, the generation who are now growing up on these smart speakers, it will be normal to them. So maybe it's not taken off yet because we haven't died, we haven't grown old and died yet, and the new generation come along, growing up these things, knowing all about it. Like I guess my generation, if you will, grew up with mobile phones. Maybe not smart at first, but they eventually did get smart. The people above you, Dan, the older lot above you, they don't understand smartphones or mobile phones. They don't really
Right.
have them. It's like generations do adapt to different things, and I think the speakers will be part of the
Oh,
next generation.
touchscreens are a perfect example. That's the argument that kids are growing up now, like little kids
Yeah.
with smartphones. Like when they reach out to a PC, they expect that
Hmm.
start scene to be touch, which is why Macs are so like kind of being getting a lot of criticism these days.
I think the first big breakthrough for these smart AIs will be when they are properly AI. Like when they can
Yeah.
have a conversation and stuff and think for themselves and recommend things and stuff. I think this is why it's a good thing Microsoft is positioning Cortana as this productivity assistant, because it's seen how the market has reacted to these normal speakers, and the market. It's a small market, yeah, but everybody else is like, I kind of don't want or need that. So, but people love it when things work for you. So if you're working in Office and Cortana's like, hey, would you like to drag these images into this document, or would you like me to pull up this last report that you were working on? Stuff like that. That's way more useful to a lot of people because you're not talking to the assistant's not talking to you. It's just showing you on-screen dialogues and bits of information and stuff that a lot of people will appreciate much more than having to shout at a speaker to turn a light on. And I think that's why Microsoft is positioning Cortana this way, being a more sort of productivity
And
thing.
And this gets to the real interesting thing, which is when we talk about Cortana being dead. Like the thing is, everything that's like Cortana that is like based off of, which is we've said it before, it's really just a front end for Microsoft's machine learning and AI initiatives, which are going to happen behind the scenes regardless of what happens
To
as an
Cortana.
app,
Yeah.
because like that is not like when people say Cortana is dead, are you also claiming Microsoft's research into machine learning and AI is also dead? Because I find that difficult to believe. Like there's no like if anything, that's where all their that along with quantum computing for them is sort of like in Azure edge computing. All of this stuff is linked together for them as the future of computing in general. Um, and as far as I know, they're still one of the biggest companies. I mean, they've been running an AI commercial now for months with what's his name, the rapper.
Yeah, I've
Uh,
seen it.
yeah, yeah, that commercial runs all the time. I've seen more commercials from Microsoft AI than I
Than
have from
any
Microsoft
other.
Surface.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And so it's
Microsoft's marketing is so weird to me 'cause it's like they
yeah.
don't market the air quotes cool stuff like the surfaces. They just market AI as if like that's like a thing
Yeah.
people buy. Like no, it's not how that works.
But and then there's also, you remember this at Build, they're cognitive services that developers can buy into. So things that have to do with machine learning, object recognition, voice recognition, all this stuff is they built the tools for it. And as a developer, you can just like plug into it. You don't need to do the research yourself. So they are positioning themselves as that, and like that's their future. So this is also another reason why I think when people say Cortana is dead, like I'm like, wait, what do you mean? Like, and I get the front facing, it's the thing on your computer, you don't use it or it's not in your country. I get that, but as a company, everything that's behind Cortana is huge for them and huge in research. But as we've been saying here, none of this technology is like, even with Alexa, what next? Tell me, people in my audience right now, you're listening. Tell me what is next with Alexa. Like, what's okay? It turns on your lights. All right. It answers you random trivia on the internet. It can play your crappy music on Spotify. And yes, you don't listen to punk probably, so you do listen to bad music. But what comes next after all of that? Like, what is the next thing for it? It's just what? It just talks to you, and if you're lonely, like once you have your lights hooked up and your fireplace is electric and your heat, everything. Once those things are connected, what do you do next with it? Like, what is so amazing? Like, what's the next evolution of this? And I'm not really sure where this stuff goes next. Like, and I think that's sort of the interesting question that they need to answer, or at least have a plan for, which I'm not sure about. But I think all this AI stuff, it's just going to be, you can't be like AI, oh, it's just a buzzword, it doesn't mean anything, and then also tell me Alexa's amazing. Like, you can't, like, those are two weird things, right? I think this AI stuff is going to grow. I think it's going to be 5-10 years, it's going to improve, but I think the stuff we're talking about today is going to be laughed upon in 5-10 years as like, yeah, remember when we were impressed with a voice trigger, you could tell your lights to turn on? Like, cool. I will give credit. I will say, someone mentioned about automation adapting to you. And this is actually something that Nest is good at, although I don't like the fact that Google owns them. But the Nest thermostat, I've used that for a few years. And what is cool about Nest is it learns as you, oh, around 6 p.m., Dan always tends to set the temperature here. And at nighttime, he turns it down at this time. And it starts to see these habits and works them into an algorithm and starts doing it automatically for you. I agree. That is kind of like where this stuff should be going, right? But it's funny because they're kind of the only ones who have done that. My Ecobee doesn't do that. The glass thermostat doesn't do that, and that is kind of annoying. But and Alexa doesn't do anything like that. Alexa doesn't like, hey, Dan tends to put beer in the freezer on Fridays. Maybe I'll ask him if he wants to do that tonight. Has Alexa ever done that to me? No, of course not. So how can this stuff be super smart or impressive? I don't know.
I imagine the end goal for these assistants is to have them look like the robots from, I cannot remember the name of the movie, but it's the one where like they're really lifelike, they have lifelike skin, and the guy who made them keeps them captive in his house somewhere, and the ending is they all die or something. I can't remember how it ends, but it's a really good movie, and I'm like, this is where Alexas should be going, to this sort of thing where the robots are real and they like talk to you and they have real movement stuff, and that'd be cool.
Yeah, yeah.
But we're very far away from that, I think. Imagine Cortana from Halo, like the actual Cortana from Halo, like built in real life. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, and not in this day and age.
No, you're right. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Anyway, that's a long-winded rant we had. But I had to say that I'm going to keep pushing this. Don't take teams on this stuff completely yet. It's too early, folks.
You know what, Dan? We had Channel One stream hosting us during that segment. I didn't mention it at all because I didn't want the stream to break again.
Oh, nice! Everybody got to hear me ranting.
Yeah, about Cortana. That's why I tried to start talking about Xbox, because the Channel One audience, I think, are mostly gamers. So I try to tie in the gaming aspect whenever Channel One's hosting us. Thanks, Channel One. I know you're gone now, but thanks.
Very good. All right. Well, I'm sure we'll revisit this topic. Anyway, the point is, whether you think it's alive or dead, they keep adding new features. Whether you find those features useful, interesting or not, that's up to you. I'm just going to, I have it's a weird job. People keep telling me it's dead. I'm like, okay, cool. But here's this new thing that's there now that wasn't there last week. I guess it's dead, but it's new. It's cool.
Mm.
I got in trouble for showing you guys the iOS email thing where
You did
on
get in trouble for that.
yeah, where on the iPhone and Outlook, when you connect that to your, like, say, your card, it'll read back your emails. Go read that article if you haven't. It's a really cool example. Cortana goes full screen and will read you your emails, and it's not just like voice recognition. Like, it doesn't just read everything in your email. It picks out the important parts. It's really actually kind of smart. It's really impressive, and Microsoft got very mad that I leaked that. So, but it's another cool feature. I was so excited about it because it worked so well. But I think that's when that does come out, for those only in the U.S. probably, you'll be impressed with not only its functionality but how smart it is and how it's able to parse your email and just pull out the pertinent information. It feels like what an assistant should be doing, and I think this is the actual power of AI machine learning versus what most people are impressed by. Like, I told it to play the latest song from Cardi B and it did. Like, cool. So we have some room left to grow on this yet. So I'm sure we'll be revisiting this topic. And actually, speaking of new builds, you talked a little bit about the Windows 10, this week with the fast ring. Cortana separated out of search, mostly because a lot of people complain about search. They just wanted search to be its own thing. This also benefits Microsoft because with Cortana separated from search, they can actually do more with Cortana and search and update those independently of each other. I suppose in theory, they could also just kill Cortana,
Yeah,
right?
that's what I'm worried about. Like, because I don't know if you've seen like what Cortana looks like now. The
Yeah,
split
it's
has
terrible.
happened. It
Yeah,
looks god awful. Like, what is that? I'm hoping that's. I really hope that they haven't just gone. We'll leave it like that for now, and we'll update it or remove it later.
Yeah, I
Like,
saw your. If you haven't
just
seen Zach's video, go to our YouTube channel. You can see his latest walkthrough the
yeah,
current fast ring build, and he shows what he's talking about here, which is Cortana now is misaligned, or not misaligned. Well, it's off center kind of thing.
yeah.
But the plans you and I had seen were right that it was going to go to the taskbar area and then eventually into the action center, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And we haven't
Whether
seen
that
that
still
happen.
happens remains to be seen. I think that's a Windows Core OS thing. It might be in Windows Lite. I don't know. Honestly, I have no idea where that idea is gone or where if it's still around. Because Control Center was another good idea that they had running on desktop, but then it sort of just didn't come to desktop ever. So yeah, I have no idea.
And not to completely drill this topic to death, although let's do it. One thing I never hear people talk about though is on like Mac OS. If you have a MacBook, I actually do. I have the brand new MacBook Air. Every couple of weeks I open it. um, but Siri's built into Mac OS, and there's like even I think there's a button for it. I think there's a button, and it's really on the MacBook Pro. No one talks about it, right? Not. And I don't mean they talk about it in a bad way or a good way, just no one talks about it.
Mm.
And so I'm wondering why Siri there apparently gets a pass, or I don't know if it's getting a pass. I think, people consider Siri to be a joke, even though I find it actually pretty good on the iPhone. I actually don't hate on Siri that much. It's pretty fast. But when it comes to Macs, no one talks about it. So here's a company that clearly doing it better than Microsoft, right? It's available in more countries, and I guess it does things people are talking about, but no one talks about it in a positive way. So I don't know. I just find that weird that no one ever brings up the Mac version, whether it's good or
That's
bad.
because nobody ever brings up Mac, Dan. Mac only
I know.
has 5% market.
Probably true.
I
But
don't know.
let's talk about Microsoft Education announcements as my rants are running us long today. So Microsoft did some big announcements this week. This was at the BETT conference, I believe that's called, BETT. So this happens every year. Microsoft, they pre-briefed me. I had some personal stuff this week, so I was unable to write this up myself. But there were a bunch of laptops announced. Lenovo 100E, Lenovo 300E, which is a 2-in-1. Another Lenovo 14W. These are all kind of boring names. These aren't consumer devices. You can go to the website and see them and even buy them, but these are sold direct to schools and institutions, usually in mass. So Acer had 3 as well, and there was also a Dell Latitude. The Acer 300E is really interesting. It's less than $300. It's a true 2-in-1. You can actually use a number 2 pencil on the screen and it'll work, which is crazy. But if you think about schools and all this kind of stuff, it's pretty smart. It also has a siloed pen, though. And then Microsoft also announced its new it's like a Surface Go pen for education. It's called the Microsoft Classroom Pen, and it's a shorter, stubbier inking device. I think it's the same 4096 levels. Probably not tilt support though, and it's meant for little kids. And it's easier for them to hold and handle. It's also cheaper. It's about $40 a pen versus the $60 to $100 for the current Surface Pen. And you can buy these in bulk and all this kind of stuff. They also saw announcements for Teams and some new software. And the point, you and I don't go into enough about this topic, and partly it's because it's just been a busy week for me. But this is a huge area for Microsoft, and it's huge in the sense that they're putting a lot of investment in it. They're getting a lot of their partners involved with it, but they're actually seeing a lot of good results. If you go back, we've reported every couple of quarters about especially in the US, but also worldwide, Microsoft's efforts in education, and it's been helping. They've been, and especially in the US, where Google is, their Chrome OS has been really huge in schools, not necessarily consumers. Microsoft's actually making inroads and is taking away market share from them. And I mean, Google's still doing well. I don't think they feel completely threatened, although they know Microsoft's coming at them pretty hard. And Teams has been really massive. The real loser here is going to be Apple, who's, I think, you saw them drop their price of their iPads recently to compete in this area. But the problem isn't just, you may look at an iPad and think amazing hardware, kids can use it, tap and all this, but one, iPad's super expensive to repair, super easy to break, also hard to manage remotely when you have like a fleet of these devices. They're just not as clean or as easy to do as what Google has done with Chrome, which is usually when you talk to IT people, they love Chrome OS because of how easy it is to manage. Windows is like in between there. Windows is closer to the manageability of Chrome. It's definitely better than Apple, but I would say not as good as Chrome. But they're getting there with all of these new software integrations. My best friend actually is a head of IT of a private school here in Massachusetts, and he actually deals with Microsoft all the time. So I actually get to hear about how this stuff works. It's really interesting. The people from the Microsoft store go to the schools. They often bring HoloLens with them and pen devices, and they demonstrate all this technology, show them how it's used. Even though he used to actually write for our site, and he's friends with me, and I tell him this stuff, he was still like, I had no idea all that pen stuff happened with OneNote and Teams and all the stuff you can do with it, and it could like automatically figure out equations for you. And I was like, oh yeah. And he's like, they demoed HoloLens. So their efforts in education are actually paying off, and it's super important, as many of you probably know, that kids are the future. If you get kids hooked on using, or at least familiar with using Microsoft products today, they grow up familiar with it, which is the thing where people are concerned about. We saw it with Macs. A lot of teenagers wanted Macs as younger. Now they turn it to arrogant writers and other technology sites who always use Macs. But we're starting to see this, transition. And if Microsoft didn't get there, the concern was that Google would be, these would just be Chrome kids, and they'd grow up with Chrome, and that's all they would know, and that's all they would want to use in high school and college. And then Microsoft would have a difficult time trying to sell them a Windows 10 PC or whatever. So I'm glad to see this. Teams is weird to me, because Teams you think of as enterprise, but teachers today are increasingly, this is a boarding school where kids go to. It's a private elite thing, but these kids are in education 24/7. They don't go home at the end of the night, right? They stay there. And so Teams allows them to talk to each other and talk about assignments and projects along with the teacher. It's a virtual classroom and allows them to do that remotely. They can share PowerPoints and links and drawings and photos, and you have conversations, and it's all like recorded and documented. And then it could be put into other Excel and Word documents. All this stuff all works together. And I think that's super fascinating. It's interesting, too, because that's the world that these kids are growing up in. So I don't know. Zach, do you have any thoughts about this stuff?
No. Did you mention the classroom pen, the new one?
Yes, I did.
I'm curious about that, because I did see that, and I obviously, me and you, or me, had a chance to play on the Surface Hub 2X back at Ignite last year. The Surface Hub 2X has a thicker pen as well, and I'm wondering if that's the same pen. Oh, because they wouldn't tell me about it. I said, why did you make the pen? Like, why is the pen like this? And they were like, can't talk about it. And I'm like, why? It's a pen. Just tell me what's wrong with it. Yeah, I'm thinking they might be the same pen or very similar because they're much thicker because people, younger people, they hold it easier and stuff. And what was the other thing? Like it's cheaper. I think it's cheaper to
It's
make.
cheaper. It's $40.
Yeah, and it also doesn't have like an eraser on the end because there's less moving parts in it. I think that was the big selling point. There's less moving parts, so it's less likely to break, so kids can throw it around and it won't, get
And you can
destroyed.
tether it. Yeah, it's got the little loop and stuff like that.
I think it's really cool. I love the stuff that Microsoft's doing in education, and like bringing it back to the Windows Lite thing. I think the Windows Lite is going to play a big part in Microsoft's education push once Windows Lite is announced. I think half the reason Windows Lite is being made is because of education. It's to compete with Chrome OS in the education market. So it should be I'm very excited to see this and see
And
where this
Surface
goes.
Go is, and this is interesting. I've been meaning to follow up on this. Surface Go, well, this always gets into is it selling well or are they just not making enough? All I can tell you is availability of Surface Go is getting tight. He tried to order some from Microsoft, and it's a couple weeks before they'll get shipped to him. He went to Best Buy. They only had 3 of them in stock. And so Surface Go seems to be selling quite well. It's going to be real interesting, actually, in just a few days. I think 5 days will be Microsoft's quarterly announcement. In fact, I'll be on Fox Business on that day to talk about Microsoft's results. But it should be one thing you want to really pay attention to is going to be obviously the Surface thing to see if, one, they get a bump in sales from the last quarter, and whether they attribute that to Surface Go. Now, Surface Go's margins are way smaller than like a Surface Pro or especially the Surface Book 2 or even Surface Studio. But it sounds like they're selling a lot of them. And if you just go around to websites like Best Buy and Amazon and Reddit and all this and read what people are saying about their Surface Go, more than that, people are really impressed with it and really are happy with the device. So, but it seems to be doing well for education as well. So, Microsoft's efforts, it's something like I want us as a site to focus more on. It's really interesting because there's so much action going on there right now. For our audience, I understand a lot of you are like pro users and you're just like, you want other things, but this is a real important aspect to Microsoft's story going forward. And it's going to continue to drive, I think, innovation around what Microsoft is focusing on and everything. But and people talk about, Microsoft doesn't know how to market to consumers. I still don't really get what that means. I don't really see Google killing it when it comes to marketing to consumers either. I mean, okay, they have like their Home Alone commercial they did, which was a success. But the fact is Microsoft's just on the ground. They're getting the work done, right? They're selling the stuff. It's doing well. You can see it in the market share numbers for education. They're getting results. So you can talk about perception, but you can also just talk about results. And I see Microsoft delivering results, which is kind of all I care about at this point. And I think that's all like someone like Satya Nadella would care about too. But yeah.
Cool. I have nothing more to add to this because I didn't pay attention to this news, unfortunately. I've been very busy this week. So yeah.
So Zach doesn't like the education stuff. But
That's
anyway.
not true. I love it. It's great. I love it.
All the hardworking people. Anyway, I think that wraps it up. We're just over an hour here. Someone had a couple of emails telling us they wanted a longer podcast, which, always I appreciate that.
There are other podcasts you can listen to that are longer than this.
Yeah, the Joe Rogan Experience, I always recommend. It's one of my. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts because I don't commute.
Neither do I. This is the only one I listen to. That's because I make it.
But I like the Joe Rogan podcast, and his go for like 3 hours. So if you want a long one, you can go there.
Has anyone ever done a 24-hour podcast?
I'm sure.
We need to break the record. Whatever it is, we should break it.
I'll take a hard pass. Anyway, let's get going. We're going to stick around and do some Q&A with the live audience right now. If you're listening to this recorded, however, this is where the podcast ends. But you're always free to join us at mixer.com/Windows Central, one word. We record Fridays at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time, and you can join the chat and see our live video as it happens. Otherwise, you can, just listen to this on your way to work and listen to the audio version. You can always send me a tweet too at Daniel_Rubino on Twitter. And you can follow Zach at ZACBOWDEN on Twitter as well. Hit us up with your questions, comments, and how we can make things better. As always, though, we do appreciate you guys listening in, and we'll catch you. Oh, actually, are we going to be back next week? You're traveling next week,
aren't you? Next week, we will not be doing a show because I am traveling to go and see Dan.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we do have a company meeting next week, so we'll see. If something major happens, we'll try to do it Thursday. But if not, yeah, expect us back in 2 weeks or something like that, or we'll figure something out. But don't worry. As always, though, thanks for listening, and take care, everyone.
I touched the screen to stop the recording. It's the first time I've ever done
Uh,
that.
Tried that.
So if you have questions, we will be here answering them for 10 or 15 minutes or wherever